part of the Press Play Podcast Network.
Iguodala to Curry, back to Iguodala, up for the layup. Oh, blocked by James. It's over. It's over. Cleveland is a city of champions once again. The Cavaliers are NBA champions.
Hi, everyone. What's good? Thanks for tuning in to the latest edition of the Cavs on the Break NBA podcast right here on the Press Play Podcast Network. I'm your host, John Sabol. Chase Smith sitting this one out tonight. But as always, we are always graced with the presence of NBA writer, Cavs writer, owner, operator of hoopswire.com. Go there for your latest Cavs and NBA news. The one and only Sam Amico. Sam, what's good, my man?
John, how are you? I'm myself doing just fine. Ready for the Cavs to get at least one of their top three scorers back at some point here.
Well, it's funny you say that because I'm currently on HoopsWire and I see a title of a headline here. It says, "Missing 3 stars finally catches up with the Cavs." Well, it was bound to happen, and it did tonight. Cavs lose to the New Orleans Pelicans 123-104 at home. And looks like they may have lost another player from an injury tonight.
Yeah, Sam Merrill, 27 points, career high against his hometown Utah Jazz, which was a great story. The game before that, 19 points, hit a huge three off a pass from Donovan Mitchell the game before that. So really coming along nicely. And then all of a sudden you hear heading into this game against the Pelicans that he was questionable with a bad wrist. Donovan Mitchell, of course, and then Merrill played 12 minutes, went 0 for 4, couldn't go anymore because of the wrist, which I guess he had suffered the injury against the Jazz on a fall and was going to try to give it a go, but it didn't go very well against the Pelicans. So you're already missing, Mitchell with who's sick, and then obviously Garland and Mobley, and now all of a sudden you're losing the guy who steps up in Merrill in their place and offers some scoring. And you throw that in with the fact that, second night of a back-to-back against a New Orleans team that's pretty decent on the road, even though they didn't have Zion Williamson. Still had, C.J. McCollum and Brandon Ingram, who are 2 of their 3 leading scorers. And then Trey Murphy went nuts, and he's capable of doing that for the Pelicans. So just, it was bound to happen. They were bound to have one of these nights without Mobley, Garland, and Mitchell.
Yeah, 3-game win streak snapped. I mean, the Pelicans team is a great road team. They're 17-12 on the year, and I mean they're playing really good ball despite not having Zion. And hey, but you had 2 Northeast Ohio natives in that game tonight, or at least I should say one of them played. In C.J. McCollum, he had a decent game. I mean, he was 7 from 15 from the floor, 18 points. Larry Nance Jr. did not play. Was it a rib injury? I think
he had a fractured rib at one point earlier this season. I guess he re-aggravated it. So, yeah, did not see Larry Nance Jr. But I always say the New Orleans Pelicans have the 2 biggest Cleveland Browns fans on their team in the entire NBA on the same team. What are the odds of that?
What are the odds of that? Absolutely. It's funny. They both, played in Portland once the Cavs got rid of Larry. And then CJ ended up coming down there too. So, hey, we're not going to talk a lot about this game because it's just it's a random game in December that the Cavs were bound to probably lose in a back-to-back. We're not going to put any stock into it. No Donovan Mitchell. I mean, I think the one thing out of this game, the biggest thing for me is, okay, well, is Sam Merrill okay? I know he's not a big player here, but he did have 27 points in the win the other night against Utah. I think if there's one thing I would take away from this game was the depth. I mean, JB emptied the bench. Every player played tonight in the game. The Cavs didn't shoot very well. I mean, at times the Cavs were down by like 10 or 12 points, and you're like, wow, this game doesn't feel like it's 10 or 12. It felt like 3,
Yeah.
Despite not having Mitchell losing by 19 points, 4 or 5 players were in double figures. So, hey, it's one of those nights. The one thing we talked about in the last pod after we recorded with Chase about the injuries to Darius Garland and Evan Mobley, you had a favorable schedule coming up here after that West Coast trip. They responded well against Atlanta. That's what we looked at, Sam. They did it. And then they did it again 2 days later against Houston and winning in overtime. And then they did it on this past Wednesday against the Jazz. So, hey, you're what, 3-1 since those injuries?
Right. You had a 4-game homestand there, and whenever I go on Mark Price podcasts, which has been multiple times now, shockingly to everybody, but
yeah, you're a recurring guest there. Anybody that hasn't checked out Mark's podcast with Sam Amico as a special guest, do so. It's fun.
Yeah, I've been on there more. I told him I've been on here more than your brother, so that really says a lot. I don't know. Maybe he just doesn't like Brent. I don't know. But anyway, his whole point, my point of that is when I go on there, he talks about, as a former NBA player, you always look at the long game and how is this benefiting us, for the playoffs? Assuming we're going to get to the playoffs, how is this benefiting us? Well, guys like Merrill, when he's healthy, are getting an opportunity to show, look, here's somebody out there who you have to guard now. If you're the opponent, this guy can spread the floor. He's going to hit threes. You've got another guy to worry about when Mitchell and Garland and Mobley are back. Merrill is a guy who could get regular minutes now because he spreads the floor, and that allows guys like Garland, Mobley, Mitchell, Karis LeVert, whoever, to go one-on-one, as opposed to, what we saw from the Knicks last year, collapsing the defense all over Mitchell and taking him out of the series for the most part. So, this is where you get benefits. Dean Wade had a really nice game against the Pelicans. He had a nice game last week. And if he can hit outside shots consistently, again, now you have a 6'10" guy who's coming out, and you have to go out around the 3-point line and defend him so that when everybody's healthy, presumably that will happen someday. When everybody's healthy, then you've got, 2 more guys along with the other guys who stretch the floor. As we're assuming Max Strus does most nights. He had a terrible shooting night against New Orleans, but most nights he's going to be an outside threat. And you throw Merrill in there, and obviously Mitchell and Garland, when healthy, can hit those too. So, it's kind of the silver lining to all these injuries. And the bad news is, because of the injuries, sometimes they're going to lose some games in the regular season in December. But hopefully in the long run, for their sake, for the Cavs' sake, look, eventually everybody healthy, they're going to be even deeper than they were going into the start of the month when they had all 5 starters.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because that's going to parlay us into our next topic of the injuries in Donovan Mitchell and the ongoing swirling of rumors, which we'll get into shortly. But I do want to say, when you look at the rest of their schedule and who they've got coming up here, they're going to get tested again, not Saturday against Chicago necessarily. The Bulls aren't playing. They've won 3 in a row tonight as we record this year on December 21st, right after the Cavs lost there to the Pelicans. But they're going to get tested with Dallas on the road Wednesday, and then Friday home against the Bucks. So you'll have 2 back-to-back games against 2 teams, one in the Western Conference in Dallas, who's, a top team there, playoff team. You'll see Kyrie and Luka Doncic there. Denver is what I think like the 6th seed right now, leading their division. I guess in division the NBA doesn't make a difference, but just for context purposes. So you're going to get even though you went 3-1 on this little homestand here, you're going to get tested right out of the gate again with a tough back-to-back games, schedule wise, not day wise, because it's a Wednesday and a Friday game.
Yeah, well, and I'll tell you what, Saturday too, they're at Chicago. The Bulls have been playing great since Zach LaVine went down, frankly. And,
interesting.
Yeah, right. And they won at Miami. They've just been playing extremely well lately. I think they're like 8-3 since Zach LaVine got hurt, right in that neighborhood. So, you'd want to have Garland and Mobley for that game, especially in Chicago. So, yeah, it's 3 of the next 4 are going to be really tough. When you talk about, and I'm not sure who the 4th team is in there. I know, like you said, Chicago, Dallas, you get Milwaukee at home.
And then you're at Toronto on New Year's Day.
At Toronto, that's always a tough place to play. Especially when you don't have all your weapons you never know what's going to happen. That what you hope for, what you need is at least Donovan Mitchell. You need him to feel better. I put that in my column tonight. Get well soon, Donovan, because this is going to be another tough little stretch here coming up right around the holidays.
So I'm a little confused. The Cavs listed Donovan out because of illness. Was it not his shoulder? He hurt his shoulder on the.
He said his shoulder was fine.
Okay.
He ran into the stanchion. It didn't look fine, but
No,
after the game, I was there, and he came out to the press conference and said, "Shoulder's fine. I'll be ready for Utah." This, of course, was Monday. Utah was Wednesday. Well, he got sick in there, and you know what? There is a lot of illness going around. Zion Williamson missed the game. Lauri Markkanen missed the Jazz win over the Pistons, which at this point sends the Pistons to loss number 25 in a row.
That was actually my next topic.
Well, yeah, I mean, and I think it's going to be 27 because they've got Brooklyn on the road on Saturday. I really doubt they win that game, which would tie the record with the Cavs and the Sixers, 26 straight losses. And then they get Brooklyn again a few nights, I think the night after Christmas at home. I thought tonight was the night that they were going to win. I really did, because they had Utah at home on the second night of a back-to-back, the Jazz, and the Jazz didn't have Markkanen. And I was just like, this is the night for the Pistons to make it happen, and they couldn't do it. So I think this losing streak is gonna set the record and go well beyond what the Cavs and Sixers at 26. I wouldn't be surprised if this hits 30 plus.
They didn't have Horton Tucker either.
No, right. Yeah, I mean, it was just there was every reason for the Pistons to win it at home, and they couldn't do it. And I think that the team is, they've got to start from scratch. You got Cade Cunningham, and everybody else can, you could gut the roster if you want to.
All right, let's talk about that real quick here. The Pistons, they started out the year, Sam, with an insane 2-0 start. They're now 2-26. They've lost 25.
They were 2-1.
I'm sorry, 2-1. Excuse me. Yeah. And then they lost. The math right there. Duh. Then they went and lost. They've lost 25 straight now. So, I mean, it's just their schedule's been tough. But you're right. That roster is awful. And yeah,
right.
If they lose another one, they will tie the record from the 2010-2011 Cavs, 13-14 Sixers. But the overall record is 28, held by the Sixers when the 2014-15 season ended and it started in the 15-16. So,
yeah, they lost two more in a row
to start the year.
28 would be the all-time record if you're counting more than one season.
Right. So if the Pistons lose 29, they would set the overall record. And remember, they're at 25 right now. So you just kind of laid out the schedule. They have it back-to-back, like you said. The 23rd with the Nets away, then back in Detroit against the Nets. Then they're at Boston on the 28th. So right then and there, those three games, if they lose, would tie the record. And then come up on Saturday, December 30th against the Raptors would be the...
Well, there's a Sixers team, I believe, in the 1970s that finished 9-73, which the Pistons would certainly might challenge that record. I think it would have been probably before, obviously, the Dr. J ABA merger, somewhere in there. Where they were 9-73, and I'm pretty sure
you're right. 9-73. That was 1973. They were 9-73 in 1973.
Yeah. So I'm pretty sure that's the all-time record. I don't think anybody's been worse than that.
Actually, one other team was
worse.
Yes.
Now,
so
percentage-wise, wasn't that during a shortened season? Maybe.
No, I got the list right here. So there were a few that were in partial seasons, like the lockout or whatever.
Right. That's what I meant, like short.
Right.
Yeah.
So the Pistons are on pace to shatter that record right now. But there was a team 12 years ago, was it? No,
during the lockout.
Well, let me see here. Is that the lockout? Lockout, what year was that?
2010, 11, I believe.
Yes, it was 12. It would be
2011, 12.
because the math
rookie year.
Yes, so the math would add up here. It was the Charlotte Bobcats in 2012 went 7-59.
Okay, so that percentage was probably worse than 9-73. Somewhere in there would have been really lousy.
You're having me do math here. Was that percentage of 0.106?
Promised me no math when I took this job,
right? Yeah, I mean, so it's funny because you look at these all-time, worst records in the top 10. There are 3 teams that are currently in the top 10 right now that are on pace to have one of the worst seasons ever. Pistons are number 1. The Spurs and the Wizards are currently 4-22. They would be ranked tied for 9th worst of all time. Remember, we're not even halfway in the season yet, but still, it's pretty bad.
Could you imagine being a Washington Wizards fan? Listen to this. Listen to this. The Washington Wizards have not won 50 or more games. They haven't even hit 50 wins in a season since 1979. They have not hit 50 wins. I mean, so the best they've been is 49-34 over the last, 43 years, 44 years? 1979, they went to the finals that year, too. They lost to the Seattle Supersonics.
Miracle Richfield year. I wonder what their record was that year. I could look it up, but
probably 47 and something.
Miracle Richfield. See if you remember. What year was that?
I mean, that would have been 76, wouldn't it?
76. They in 76.
The Wizards
48-34.
Well, then they were the Bullets.
Yeah.
Which I never understood the nickname change. How is a stationary bullet sitting on a shelf any worse than practicing wizardry? But
yeah, right. Well, you could say that a lot about random name changes in sports. We know that all too well here in Cleveland.
Right.
So.
Right.
But you're right. I'm looking at the Wizards' all-time records here. My goodness, even those years when Gilbert Arenas was in town with
they had some good teams with Arenas and Antoine Jameson.
They were a 500 team, Sam. 04-05 was the best year they had in that stretch. 45-37. 06-07, that year when they lost in the first round to the Cavs, they were 41-41.
Well, I'll tell you what. I know a guy who writes about the Wizards and has been for longer than I've been doing the Cavs, and he covers them relentlessly. He is writing the similar, the equivalent of dribbles after every game. He's writing pregame and postgame and interviews. I mean, if you and I forgive me, I can't remember his name right now, but I know him when I see him on Twitter because he's got the Wizards logo as his profile picture.
Yeah.
I can't imagine doing that where, at least as far as we go in Cleveland, LeBron came back and now there's a competitive team again and, all that. But for them, it just keeps getting worse.
It's basketball Siberia, man.
It really is.
There have been some locations, and I've joked about on the podcast before, of locations in the league where it's basketball Siberia. I've joked that it was Minnesota and Sacramento, and all of a sudden those two franchises are actually doing really well. Yeah. I think Charlotte would be in that category. Washington is clearly in that category. I would say Phoenix used to be in that category for some time there. But now they're competitive and good. So yeah, crazy times, man.
Only one team in the NBA has not played on Christmas Day.
The Wizards.
No, they played when they were the Bullets.
Oh man, you're dropping some trivia on me.
This is I want to know if any of our listeners know this without Googling it.
It's got to be a newer team.
Well, I guess they're kind of newer. Yeah, I mean, they're not
Western Conference team.
Nope.
Okay, Hornets.
You got it.
Yes.
The Hornets.
And you can see I'm right here. I'm not looking it up.
Right. Yeah. I remember I was flipping through the other night and there was like a Christmas Day game from 1978 or something on there.
Yeah.
It was the Cavaliers from 1978 were playing. It might have even been earlier because they were playing on Christmas, the Buffalo Braves, who now, of course, are the Los Angeles Clippers. But yeah, so even the Buffalo Braves have been on Christmas Day, whereas the Charlotte Hornets are the only team. Memphis last year was the first year that the Grizzlies had played on Christmas.
Yeah, I do remember that. Good point.
Yeah. So anyway, there's our Wizards, Pistons, and Hornets talk for the podcast.
Well, we're going to get back into Cavaliers talk because we want to talk about the latest on this Donovan Mitchell rumor that continue to kind of be the talk of NBA circles ever since those injuries of Darius Garland and Evan Mobley went down last week. And it's a topic that everyone's been really chatting about all week long. Sam and I are going to get into it very latest, what he knows, what he's hearing coming up. You can't see us. Sam and I are on Zoom at both of our houses, and you can't see the shirts that we're wearing. We are wearing brand spanking new Homage t-shirts. If you are from the Cleveland area, Columbus, you all know this company that is helping us out here. Boy, they have designed quite the array of NBA gear, Cavs gear, Major League Baseball, NFL, official licenses. Sam, what Homage shirt are you wearing of the Cavaliers at the moment? What is that? Is that your boy, Austin?
Austin, I'm so old school. It's Austin Carr as a player, and I'm sad to say that I don't remember I don't remember Austin as a player, just as a fan favorite, as a color analyst and in-game analyst. But I have watched him on YouTube and all that. So yeah, when I saw this shirt, I was just like, I have to have it. It's AC, not only as a player in the old school Cavs uniform, but of course the AC I know and love, always smiling about something. So yeah, it's perfect for me. I love NBA history and old school stuff, and the fact that I would consider it Austin Carr a friend. I just very much look forward to wearing this T-shirt in front of him and having him tell me how great I am because I'm wearing it, probably for no other reason, but at least he'll tell me I'm great.
AC's always smiling, and if I want to be around him when you wear that shirt in front of him, because his grin's gonna get even bigger and bigger.
I think we should meet at center court at halftime or something in front of fans. That would be my goal.
You know what? I'll wear my Homage shirt that I got of the NBA Cavs NBA Jam shirt had the stats of Mark Price and Brad Daugherty. That's the one I have. Yeah. They were nice enough to send me another one. It was a gray with the old school Austin Carr era Cavs wine and gold script on it. I know Chase was rocking a wine hoodie with the new Cavs font on the front of it. Just some awesome products there. Perfect gift this holiday season. So if you can, go on our show notes here, wherever you're listening to your podcast, on Spotify, on Apple, or any other location there, wherever you're seeing our description of our show, scroll on down. You'll see the link. You can buy your Cavs gear, Browns, Guardians, Ohio State, MAC, you name it. Great quality product right there on the Homage website. Go on our show notes, click that link there, and enjoy yourself a nice, warm, cozy hoodie. Anything you want. Makes a great holiday gift.
What's up, everyone? I'm Holly Wetzel.
And I'm Tyrus Powell.
And we are your hosts of The Orange is Oranger, a Cleveland Browns podcast on the Press Play Podcast Network. We give you all the dog pound coverage that you'll need to get you through the regular season, hopeful postseason, and I'd say off-season, Tyrus, but is there really ever an off-season for this team?
Thankfully for our podcast, Holly, there really never is when it comes to the Cleveland Browns. Don't miss our breakdown of each week's matchup, game recaps, and any and all news out of Berea to feed your Browns appetite. As we know, Holly, dogs gotta eat.
Yes, they do. So hit that subscribe button and never miss an episode of the Orange is Oranger, Cleveland Browns podcast on the Press Play Podcast Network.
What's up, everyone? Chase Smith here, host of the Chase Smith podcast, and my podcast reflects who I am. My hobbies, my interests, my passions, my curiosities, my careers, my questions, and my family. I'll spend time talking about all types of sports, movies, TV shows, trending news stories, and other cultural events, and even faith. This is who I am, and I hope I can get to know you as well. Join me on the Chase Smith podcast, and let's have some thought-provoking conversations, only on the Press Play Podcast Network.
Looking for new insights on the Cleveland sports scene with a unique side of Cleveland sports history? Then you found the perfect podcast. I'm John Sabol.
And I'm Scott Sabol, and we're hosts of the Sabol Brothers on the Baseline podcast, a podcast about Cleveland sports, but not your typical podcast about the land's sports teams. Join us as we embark on a journey of sharing a unique and historical side of Cleveland sports history with the help of some former Cleveland sports stars and other historical figures.
All right here on the Sabol Brothers on the Baseline podcast, part of the Press Play Podcast Network.
And we're back here at Cavs on the Break NBA podcast, right here on the Press Play Podcast Network. John Sabol alongside Sam Amico. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you are listening to podcasts. We appreciate you guys listening in, staying with us here. Now we're getting into a topic here that has been on the hot button issue, Sam, with the Cavs fans, NBA circles, about Donovan Mitchell. There was an assumption, I guess you could say an educated assumption, if that even makes sense, that the Cavs should trade Donovan Mitchell. We've kind of talked a little bit about it. Chase has brought this up many times too. With the injuries, they're just going to cave in and quit on the season, which the Cavs are not doing with Donovan Mitchell, with his status with the team with Evan Mobley and Darius Garland. Teams have called the Cavs, right? There's intrigue there. What do you know? What are you hearing? I don't think they do anything, but what say you, and what are you hearing?
No, I don't think they'll do anything either. I put it this way: when Garland and Mobley went out, I believe, and others have reported that other teams started calling about Mitchell because they thought, well, maybe there's something there where the Cavs are just going to mail it in because they're going to be missing Garland for, theoretically 4 to 6 weeks, and Mobley for 6 to 8 weeks. So maybe they're, I guess, if you're other teams, you're calling to say, hey, what are you guys thinking? And the Cavs thinking is basically, look, we just have too much belief right now in this team when healthy to do anything but try to prepare for a playoff run. There's no sense in the organization. Anybody who's called has been shot down quickly. Let's put it that way. That much I do know. There hasn't, nobody's made any kind of offer for Donovan Mitchell. It's been more like, what do you guys, might you be sellers at the trade deadline or before the trade deadline, in which the Cavs have said no, but other GMs have to call and find out. So, and they've been thwarted, any of those questions have been rebuffed. So, there's really there's no need to trade. We talked about this on the last podcast. There's no need to trade Donovan Mitchell right now. The Cavs are right in the mix for the playoffs, despite all the injuries, which have been, right up there with the Browns when it comes to missing your top guys. So, the good news for the Cavs is those guys are due back. Mitchell, obviously, knock on wood, is just sick. He's going to be, I'm assuming he'll be ready to go Saturday against Chicago. So there's just no reason for them to trade him. He's not asking for a trade or requesting a trade or have one eye. As far as we know, he has, one guy said, I know a guy who knows Mitchell, who, a reader said this on Twitter, says, I know a guy who knows Mitchell, thinks he's gone. And I'm like, well, we talk to Mitchell all the time, and he never, ever gives that indication. I really do think so much of what happens with Mitchell is going to be based on what happens this season. If the Cavs can put together a playoff run, or I think get to the second round, then and continue to show promise, then I don't think there's any sense that he's out of here at the first opportunity, which wouldn't be until the end of next season would be his first opportunity. But this summer, this offseason would be the season to start thinking, okay, we need to get him signed to an extension, or if we don't, then yeah, we've got some things to think about. So, but as far as this year, no, I don't foresee them doing anything. I think they're going to stand pat and see how far they can go. That's why this team was built. That's why they traded for him, to give it. They knew he had a few years on his contract, and they wanted to give it some time. And they've only had 1 year with Mitchell, one season. So, and John, as you saw, I'm sure I sent you the link on the podcast or on the website, was Adrian Wojnarowski. Somebody asked him, on Threads, which is the alternative to Twitter or X or whatever it's called now. Somebody asked him on there, can the New Orleans Pelicans get in on the Donovan Mitchell sweepstakes? And Wojnarowski's answer was, there is no Donovan Mitchell sweepstakes. The Cavs aren't looking to trade him. So I think that somebody who's an absolute authority like Woj, if he knows that and sees that, then I think he's speaking truth.
I think the timing of these injuries are key here because you have so much of the season left. Still got 50-some games remaining. By the time Mobley and Garland come back, you're looking after the new year. You're looking in closer to the trade deadline. Actually, after the trade deadline, potentially, more than likely. So, the Cavs would be wise, in my opinion, just to wait and to see where they are. If they can, be a late pick and get into the play-in tournament at worst case scenario, or I guess it would be worst case. Worst case means they'd not get in the playoffs. But if they're in the playoffs, worst case would be a play-in tournament game, and you have those guys back, and you could take a run at it. I mean, there's just still too much talent on this team, Sam, that Kobe Altman and company would just quote unquote give up and just trade Donovan Mitchell away now, when you just have two guys who are going to come back this season. Now, if you want to play the old hypothetical game, which we know you and I and Chase love to play when he's on here, is what if these injuries were season ending? Would that alter Altman's change or his approach? I think it could. I think it would change Mitchell's, because I 100% agree with you. Donovan is in a situation where he wants to see where this team is going to go and how far they go this year. He's 100% bought in. There's no any feet out the door with him. He wants and is invested in this team. He said that to us at Media Day when we all talked with him. And remember, I asked him point blank about his contract and everything, and about his extension. I mean, yeah, he's not going to sign the extension because he's going to get more money if he waits to sign it anyways. It's not necessarily have anything to do with the Cavs. But there's just a lot of moving parts here. The Cavs hold all the leverage here, and they're not going to panic. Kobe Altman is not that kind of guy, and I said that before, where he's knee-jerk reaction and he's just going to make a move like that. Here's the thing. If you're going to trade Donovan Mitchell, you better get draft picks back. That's the key. You would have to do that. And whether that happens at the deadline, which we both agree will not happen, or if it happens in the summer, which is potentially more likely, that's the kind of return you're going to look at, as well as established players.
Yeah, I think they would get obviously they'd get a pretty decent haul for a guy who's an all-star starter. But I mean,
that's a podcast for a different day, but we're just for the sake of talking.
Yeah, and they would, they would. And if you look at this team, the trajectory before they traded Markkanen and Colin Sexton, they still had an upward trajectory, promising team. And I feel like, with Mobley and Garland and Strus and Jared Allen, they would still have a very promising team. Look, this year, if everybody stays healthy, let's just talk about this year. If everybody stays healthy or relatively healthy, Boston, Milwaukee, and Philadelphia, those are the top three teams in the East right now. That's the way it's going to stay.
Mm-hmm. That's not changing.
No, those three are going to stay at the top. And the Cavs finished fourth last year. Right now, the Cavs are 16-13. Okay, at this recording, the Orlando Magic, are in fourth, and they're 16-11. So the Cavs have as many wins as the Magic. They just happen to have played 2 more games. Mm-hmm. And then you have the Knicks, who are in fifth, also, 16-11. I think they're in fifth because of conference record or whatever. Excuse me. And then the Heat are 16-12, and they're in sixth. The Cavs are 7th, 16-13. And I think the Pacers, the Nets, and the Hawks are all going to finish below the Cavs anyway.
The Pacers have cooled off too.
So, yeah, right. I mean, I suspect Orlando's not going to finish fourth.
Yeah, I was just going to say that too.
As nice of a run as they're having, it's going to be between the Cavs and Knicks and the Heat. And I think it's going to be that way all year. And the Cavs get their players back. You never know what could happen. You really don't. And I think that's the way the Cavs are looking at it, as opposed to, wow, we have to give up on the season because we're never going to catch the Orlando Magic at 4. I don't think that. I know that the Cavs aren't thinking that. They're thinking, we can get into the playoffs in a good spot, probably with home court advantage in the first round again. And if we get the Knicks or the Heat, or say the Pacers get their act together and climb back up, which I don't suspect, I really think that the Cavs are, and it's not even me thinking. You just look at their record right now, and they're tied in wins with the team that's currently in fourth. I think they have an excellent shot to get that fourth spot once they end up getting healthy. All they have to do now is stay the course. They don't have to be any better than they are right now until Mobley and Garland get back. And then when it means the most, you got to be healthy and be playing your best basketball. But that's, John, that's March, and that's a few months away. So I think they're in a good spot, and there's no reason to trade Mitchell when he's not asking for that and he's under contract.
Do you want to hear something that's going to blow your mind? I just looked this up, and I agree with everything you're saying too. You mentioned like you're going through the whole like standings and teams that could be there or couldn't be there. And again, I agree with you. Top 3 isn't going to change. Cavs are going to finish at best 4 through 6. The Cavs finished the season last year with a 51-31 record, 20 games above 500 with the 4th seed in the Eastern Conference. Cavs just lost tonight to go to 16-13. They have 29 games. Without looking it up, and I can tell if you're looking it up here as we record this on Zoom. Sam, do you know what the Cavs record was last year when they were at win number 29? Or game number 29?
18-11?
Man, you are on the money. You didn't hesitate? Yeah.
No, I thought I would have thought, but I mean, it wasn't much better. No.
It wasn't much better. People forget too. The Cavs last season. Well, I mean, the people don't necessarily forget, but I mean, the Cavs last year came out firing. They won 8-1,
and
then they kind of sputtered. They're only 2 games better last year than they are this year at this point. And yes, I know Garland and Mobley are out, and they've had injuries throughout the entire season, including those 2 smaller injuries before their knee and jaw. But Donovan has been hurt. He's hurt now.
I think, John, not to cut you off, but I think that they're deeper this year than they were last year.
Exactly. Because you have Max Strus and George Niang in there, and Craig Porter. Are those 3 guys are given the max amount of depth, more so Niang and Strus, and they're more weapons too. I mean,
well, you have Levert and Okoro, who obviously were here last year, but
they've been hurt.
Those guys have been playing just fine. They know their coach. It's not like they have a new coach and a new system and a new personality to deal with them, who's managing them.
Yep.
So I just think I know people are like wanting me to be more panicked because when they were right after LeBron left, I was probably maybe even too hard on them. But now I don't see a reason to be. They're right in the mix of, as we just said, right in the mix of that 4 through 6 range where they'll avoid the play-in tournament and they don't even have all their weapons. So I think they're in a good spot right now. Now, granted, there's these 4 games coming up that we talked about, this tough stretch that's going to be very tough. But then they've got 6 straight home games. from January 3rd to January 17th, they play 6 in a row at home, which is almost unheard of in the NBA.
Back in the day, you had those.
Back in the day,
yeah, I remember. Or
modern day,
early those early 90s or whatever.
Yes.
I remember like looking at the old schedule pocketbook, schedules that you used to get, looking at them, and you would have a lot of these long homestands, long road trips that were like 8-9 games or something like that out west. Now that I think of the CBA kind of eliminated that. Now you have kind of like too many West Coast trips, but you're right. You don't get 6 home games like that in a row.
Not very often. Yeah, I do remember that. I do remember that you used to go when you went to the West Coast, you'd play like everybody on the West Coast, and then you go back and do a Southern trip. For like the Dallases, Houstons, the Spurs, and some of the Phoenix, some of those other teams out there.
And you always did Utah and Denver back to back.
Yes.
And then you always hit the Lakers and Clippers. And then if you went to Sacramento, you knew you were going to hit Portland and Seattle. Mm-hmm. And then if you're going to do the Texas Triangle, you're going to fit Phoenix. Yeah,
there was no, we're going to play, we're going to fly down for a quick game against Houston, then we're coming back home. No, it used to be a lot more daunting. And of course that they would not fly on their own jets. I remember one time when I was in college, I was in the airport, and come, Mark Price and Brad Doherty and Larry Nance and the rest of the Cavs just come walking in because they're flying a regular flight like the rest of us. So yeah, things have really changed. But going back to modern day, it's nice that they're getting these 6 games in a row at home, especially after a tough trip.
And you know what? We talked about this on a few weeks ago podcast to start the year. The Cavs had a tough West Coast road trip to start the year, and then it's kind of bookended because they're going to have a tough West Coast road trip to end the year, and it's going to be could decide their seeding. I'm just looking at it real quick here. Beginning of April, the end of the season. Denver, Utah, Phoenix, Lakers, Clippers. So it's kind of like that old school trip we were just talking about. You're hitting Denver and you're hitting Philly, Denver and Utah. Philly's a home game before that. And then you're going to both hit the LA teams, and Phoenix is getting sprinkled in there. I remembered those old trips like that. And I just, after I said it and you were talking, I went to look and I'm like, sure enough, that old school trip is right there. But
and that's going to be tough because the West is going to be really tight to the end. So, Phoenix is going to be playing their guys, and the Lakers and the Clippers. I mean, those teams all have, out of all the teams you just named, the Lakers are going to be the easy game on the trip, which obviously going against LeBron.
Yep.
But anyway, that's way down the road, and a lot certainly could and certainly will happen between now and then.
Yeah, you got to beat up on these Eastern Conference teams in the middle of the season and sprinkle in some bad Westerns there, and you'll have some tough games here or there. It's the NBA, that's not a cakewalk. But the good thing is you do have a lot of your you have a lot more home games coming up here because the Cavs have played quite a bit of on the road, even though despite that being the case, they have not played well at home this season, which is a whole nother thing, which JB can't figure out. He's been asked that question and he's not quite sure. And I don't think anybody really understanding why the Cavs have struggled so much at home.
Seems like when their injuries are at their absolute worst is when they have a home game. That's what I can gather from that, is that their home schedule has not been kind in the sense that they've played a lot of very good teams at home. They have had a lot of injuries when at home. And they've played a lot like tonight, where, they've had 2 home games in a row, back-to-back nights, and the other team doesn't have a game. Like the Pelicans did not have a game last night. So I think that
good point.
Even though they're the games are at home, they've had a lot working against them, where they've been pretty good on the road when healthy.
Yep. Good point. I didn't think about it that way. But yeah, you're right. It's just a bad luck in the way the schedule has lined up.
Yeah.
And scenarios and variables that are out of their control, the injuries, and then versus who's coming in and what they're dealing with. So, all right. Well, that'll wrap it up here, Sam. A lot to look forward to for the Cavaliers. And we'll see how they can go forth here in the next few days, wrap up the month of December with Chicago, Dallas, and Milwaukee in the first of the year, beginning at Toronto on January 1st. And from then, they're going to have some games in there to try to build on whatever they can with the chemistry they have with the guys they have. So, any closing thoughts here as we approach the new year and the holiday season?
Yes, I have a very important closing thought. I hope that somehow they refined the heating system at Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse because it's freezing in there. We literally, and I tweeted something out about it, and I said, why is it always freezing in Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse? But then I said, I put a disclaimer in there. Maybe it's just me because I'm old and therefore, always cold. But no, some woman tweeted back at me and said, no, you're absolutely right. It's freezing in here. And I'm not the only one. So I don't know why that is. All of a sudden, it got really cold in there. And I hope that it gets fixed before those 6 straight home games, because odds are I'll be at all 6 of them. And I don't want to have to
put on another layer.
People are layering. People are, I get that when you're going out, to watch the Browns or the the Guardians in April, but when you're playing an indoor sport, it's not, unless it's hockey, I guess.
Well, the hockey rink is underneath the floor.
Yeah, that could be it. I don't know. I just wanted to put that out there because you asked me for any closing thoughts, and I'm sure that
Sam, I think you might be getting old.
Is regretting that you asked me that, but anyway,
deep thoughts with Sam Amico.
Heat up the arena, baby.
There you go. All right. Well, you can read Sam Amico at hoopswire.com. Sam, it's been real, man. We'll chat again soon, buddy. Merry Christmas. I hope Santa is good to you. I hope he brings you a sweater for those indoor games.
Oh, you and me both.
Thanks for listening, everyone. Have a good holiday.
Congratulations, Cleveland. Your decades-long wait is finally over. The Cavaliers are NBA champions.